I am still very new to learning to grow a garden. I wasn't necessarily raised with my family growing a garden in the backyard. I was raised around my great grandma did grow a really big garden, and my uncle helped her work in her garden. And so I do remember going over and helping pick potatoes or dig potatoes when I was really young. I mean, really young. And then as I got a little bit older, I did experience some more gardens. A few family friends had some gardens, and I would go out and work in those. And at the time, I didn't love gardening at all. It was more of like that was a chore to me, and I didn't see it as something that was fun or something to learn or useful really. But obviously as I've gotten older, my entire perspective has changed on growing a garden, and I definitely see the importance of having a garden in your backyard and learning to preserve your own food. And so that is really something that I wanted to start with my own family, and kind of carry on. I wanted them to start from an early age and learn the skills of gardening, and to just get out in the garden and see it as fun and not as a chore, so that as they get older, it's just something that is part of who they were as children, and maybe that will help them as they grow a garden as adults. But my husband was really the one to start growing a garden. When we first got together, he was the one that put a small garden in our backyard and really kind of ignited that. And so as the years have gone by, I've really stepped out of the home and kind of into the garden with him. And he's taught me a ton about gardening. And I've also, the last few years, really been trying to get out and do my own and learn more and be a lot more hands-on and get the kids involved with the garden. And so I'm definitely still in the early years of learning how to grow a garden, but like with everything else, I just take it season by season. I learn what I can from that season, and I really have been trying to talk with other people and other experienced gardeners to get an idea of what I need to do, because there is definitely a science into growing a garden. Especially this year, we had a really, really wet season to start with. So in May, when we would be planting, it was just crazy. There was tons of rain. The ground was so wet. It was really hard to get the plants planted at the appropriate time. And then we went through a season in the summer where it was extremely dry and we had no rain. And then the last several weeks, we've just had a ton of rain again. So our plants kind of wilted down in the middle of the summer where they weren't getting a ton of rain. So our garden didn't do as well as it has in the years past. But we got a few tomatoes from our own plants. We got a few, enough, but we didn't get a lot all at once. And so I decided to go out. I wanted to try preserving some tomatoes. And so I went out and got a big, huge box from the Amish store. And so that is what I'm working up today, and kind of walking you all through just what I'm doing with these tomatoes. The funny thing is that I really, really love tomatoes, and Dave really, really hates tomatoes. And so it's kind of funny because every single year, whenever he was growing the garden and everything, he would grow tomatoes. And I always thought it was so funny because he doesn't even like them, but I would have some. And so that was really nice because I just love having a sliced tomato. I can eat a tomato and onion and mayonnaise sandwich with toasted bread, and I love that. I think it's delicious. Or I'll have biscuits and gravy in the morning with a slice of fresh tomato. I love making tomato, cucumber, and onion with a little vinegar and sugar, and my great grandma used to do that. I remember on Sundays for lunch when we would go over there, if it was summertime, she always had sliced tomatoes, cucumber, and onion, and it was so good. And so I really, really like them, and he doesn't. So as far as eating them fresh, it's kind of hard because I'm really the only one that will eat them fresh, other than tomato sauce or salsa. He loves tomato-based things like chili and spaghetti and taco, things like that. And then so he'll eat things that have tomato in them, but he won't just eat a sliced tomato. And he loves homemade salsa. So I don't actually buy any of our salsa. I usually always make it from scratch. I don't can a lot of salsa, but I'll use whole canned tomatoes and then just make the salsa as I go, or as we need it, which it's worked out fine for me. I'm not saying that I won't try to make some and can some salsa in the future. It's just not something I've done up to this point. But these tomatoes I am slicing and then I'm going to roast. And so my thought process in this is that I've watched and read a few different things about roasting tomatoes and how the skin peels off a lot easier and things like that, which I didn't actually end up peeling the skin off because I put them in the food processor and made a sauce out of them. So for me, that worked out just fine. But I tossed them in some olive oil with a few herbs and salt and pepper, and I roasted them in the oven at 425 degrees. And then once I was done with that, I moved them over to the food processor and food processed them, and then I put them into some small jars. And so my plan is to actually just go ahead and use those this week, those small jam jars that I put the sauce in, and make some homemade spaghetti sauce and just kind of experiment around with the process and see how I like the sauce homemade, or what I can add to it to kind of see how I like it before I try to make just a really big batch of homemade tomato sauce that we don't actually like. My main goal is obviously to try and preserve as much of the garden harvest as I can, but we also consume quite a bit of what our garden is producing in the season that it is producing in. So like our cucumbers and our squash and zucchini and things like that, we actually try to use as we get it. So we'll make fried squash and zucchini, we will make pickles with the cucumbers, or we'll just slice the cucumbers and eat those with salads and things. With the tomatoes, I'll slice those and eat those. But another good way of having tomatoes just, without preserving them and just eating them with a meal is by roasting them in the oven and just having those as a side item. I know, like we've talked about before, that not everyone likes tomatoes, but I was making these in the oven and I tossed them with garlic powder, olive oil, basil and oregano and parsley, and salt and pepper. And as it was cooking, I said to myself, I think I'm just gonna start making these roasted tomatoes every day just to be able to smell the fragrance of what was cooking in the oven. It made the entire house smell so warm and delicious and good. And it was so funny because the kids were like, what are you making? What are you making? And I'm like, I'm just roasting tomatoes. That's all that I'm doing. But as using your produce as it comes in, I'm also, like I said, I'm not actually preserving this sauce. I'm gonna make a spaghetti sauce and just kind of see how I like the sauce before I try to preserve any homemade sauce, because we do use a lot of tomato sauce over the winter time because I'm making chili and spaghetti and taco things, just all kinds of different recipes that require tomato sauce. And so I want to kind of experiment around with that before I just dive right in and can a bunch of tomato sauce that I don't like. But I'm also trying out different techniques. So just the same way as I roasted the tomatoes, I'm going to try this technique of actually blanching the tomatoes and then peeling the skin. Some people I've read about will core the tomato, wash the tomato, dry it, core it, and then they will stick it on a cutting board or a cookie sheet, and they will freeze them whole and then put them into a Ziploc bag. And then whenever they're ready to use them, they'll just take them out and they'll thaw them in some warm water, and they say the skin peels right off. I haven't tried that. That's something I might do with a few of the other tomatoes I still have left. But I wanted to try the blanching technique. And so whenever you're blanching, all you do is wash and then core the tomato, put it in hot boiling water, and then put it into an ice bath, and then After the ice bath, you take it out and the skin will peel right off. At that point, you can choose to can your whole tomatoes, or you could use them and start making a sauce with them. It would just take a while to boil down, things like that. So I'm new to gardening and I'm new to preserving, so I'm just trying to see different techniques and see how they work and what I want to follow through with, because I probably will go back and get some more tomatoes. And basically what I mainly want to do with them is make tomato sauce. So I'm just trying to see, to me, I felt like that the tomatoes did better whenever I sliced them and then roasted them and then put them in the food processor. As far as just the thickness of the sauce went, I felt like the sauce was thicker. So I don't know if it would be a less time consuming process to roast them and then make a sauce, or if it's more time consuming or less time consuming to blanch them and then boil down a sauce. So, because I haven't done that yet. So I'm planning to blanch some more and then try to boil down a sauce and see both techniques, which one I think works best. So if you have done this already, please share your thoughts with me. I would really appreciate that. Like I said, I'm still learning, so I'm just trying out different techniques. Like I said before, I typically make all of our salsa homemade, and in order to do that, I always use just whole roasted, or not roasted, sorry, I would just use whole tomatoes. And so my idea with using or blanching these tomatoes is to make a homemade salsa with them and kind of see how that turns out. And if I think that it turns out well, then I will blanch some more and make some homemade salsa and can that. So we'll see how that goes. At this point, I think that blanching them, it works just as well for getting the skin peeled off as roasting does. So both techniques to me worked well, but for the main goal of what I want to use my tomatoes for is making a tomato sauce. I do think that roasting them with the olive oil and the herbs and salt and pepper is probably the way that I'm going to go in the future as I go to can my tomato sauce and preserve it for the coming season. Y'all let me know what your favorite way to preserve tomato is in the comments, or if you have any links to recipes that would be helpful or useful for me as I go on this journey of learning to preserve my own tomatoes and make sauce for my family. Thank you all so much for sticking around and listening to my stories, and if you enjoy our channel, we would love for you to like and subscribe. Have a great day.